In the golden age of British furniture, the 18th century, one man defined the age in wood. He stood for luxury, elegance, the finest furniture ever to come from these isles. His name? Tomas Chipendale.
He was the best. He was a master at his craft. You can't beat that.
In this film, we'll see how an enigmatic Yorkshire joiner escaped his humble roots to conquer fashionable London. He won favour by bestowing grandeur and taste upon a new moneyed class. We'll reveal the techniques he mastered.
You know, when we stand in front of this furniture, it's a work of art.
Kept alive by craftsmen today.
Design inspiration is what it was, by a man who is truly incredible and wonderful.
Through his groundbreaking designs, he became famous at home in Britain and across the Atlantic.
We will know in 300 years' time, in 1,000 years' time, we will know Chippendale's name. Why? Because he's already done 250 years.
And we'll reveal how Chippendale was betrayed by the very men he'd worked so hard to please, ending his days in penury. But most of all, we'll celebrate his finest creations, the defining masterpieces of the Georgian age. Thomas Chippendale's early life has been pieced together from a few tantalising fragments of information. We know he was born here, in the small Yorkshire village of Otley, in 1718. And even though opportunities were limited, we know Thomas went into his father's trade, carpentry.
Yorkshire was not exactly in the mainstream of furniture making at this time, or the high point of high fashion. In Chippendale's own milieu, if you like, there was the vernacular tradition of furniture made from oak, beautifully made often, but fairly sturdy, standard things for which design barely changed from one generation to the next.
Just one telling object survives from the Chippendale family firm, this oak chest. It's simple, robust, and it's lasted centuries. But it's basic, and the joints are clumsy. A talented and ambitious young man, Chippendale set his sights on greater things. And there was only one place to go: London. The young Chippendale would have been amazed by this strange, bustling metropolis. In the mid-18th century, London was at the heart of a Britain on the rise. A rapidly expanding empire across the world meant power. It meant an influx of luxurious, exotic goods into ports across the nation. And it meant wealth for merchants, lawyers, and shippers. This moneyed set would come to be known as the middle classes, a group Chippendale would have had his eye on.
The mid and late 18th century see this great surge in buying things, in the material culture. And that's because whole new groups of people have more money to spend on pleasure and money to spend on their surroundings, and also a far greater sense of their status.
They wanted to buy all the fineries they could afford, from grand portraits to fine china. And there was one thing at the top of their wish list.
The way you impressed people with your taste was how you dressed and how you furnished your home. And of course you furnished your home with a collection of things, of fine arts from abroad, and furniture. So furniture was the emblem. It was the showpiece of your home.
Chippendale would have noticed that tastes were getting more exotic. Oak was now seen as old-fashioned, and there was a new wood on the block, mahogany, from the Empire's West Indies.
Mahogany as a raw material had the ability to transform an entire industry. It's hard, but it's not too hard. It's durable, it's strong, but also for a carver, it's a wonderful wood to use because of its capacity to take fine detail, to carve crisply, and to produce a really clean finish.
Chippendale truly mastered this wood, manipulating it to produce spectacular furniture. This is one of his earliest chairs. It's been carved to the most elegant effect. So exceptional was his skill, he came to be known as the High Priest of Mahogany. But Chippendale still needed to make a name for himself. In 1754, he did something completely revolutionary, establishing him at once as the greatest designer of his day. It was bold, but it wasn't a piece of furniture. It was the first ever furniture catalogue. The Gentleman and Cabinet Maker's Director contains over 160 of Chippendale's own designs.
Right on the title page, it tells you everything you need to know about what it is and who it's for. A large collection of the most elegant and useful designs of household furniture.
This catalogue contains everything the fashion-conscious shopper of the 18th century could possibly want for their home. From chairs to breakfast tables, cabinets and fire screens. In an attempt to attract the most customers, he included the 3 major fashions circulating town. The modern style, fresh out of Paris, today we'd call it Rococo, an extravagant confection of curls, swirls and fanciful carving. The Chinese, inspired by an 18th century passion for the Orient, adorned with pagodas and make-believe Chinese figures. And Gothic, a medieval fantasy that revived patterns from the Middle Ages. Chippendale was all about creating what the customer wanted, in whatever style they chose.
He's confident that he can convince all noblemen, gentlemen or others who will honour me with their commands, which means everyone who is going to actually commission him, that every design in this book can be improved, both as to beauty and enrichment in the execution of it by their most obedient servant, Thomas Chipendale. So what he's saying is really quite key, in that he's saying not all the designs are perfect. All you have to do is ask me to make it, and I will guarantee that they will look better. There is a figure of Mercury at the end of the preface. And Mercury is the messenger god, and he's also the god of commerce. Printed on his banner is collegiate ut spargat, collected in order to distribute, which is a perfect thing, because that's exactly what this book is. It's a collection of designs brought together to better distribute it.
No craftsman had ever produced something that looked so fine, that is so detailed, and also quite doctrinaire in a way, laying down rules, orders, perspective for furniture. This was something that architects did, but not furniture people. They were tradesmen, they were craft people. And this is actually very, very important landmark, both because it gives everybody else in the trade a model so that they can use it. So it's going to create a style.
Chippendale's style became so popular, inferior craftsmen started using the director to make copies. James Lomax is an expert at spotting the fakes from the fortunes.
Well, the first thing that strikes you, of course, is the colour. We find this Chippendale chair is a wonderfully deep, rich colour, which is what was most admired in the 18th century. The other, on the other hand, is much lighter and, perhaps not quite so admired at the time. This has far, far better quality. Mahogany, much denser, much richer, much more expensive. But the carving on this is superb. It's absolutely as crisp and as sharp as you can make it. The splendid use of the materials in the cutting of the fronding here and the leaves, the splendid curvature of the back. It's sort of seamless in its wonderful tactile quality. The highlights on some of the edges of the carving make it really sparkle. This, on the other hand, is terribly flat. Very little depth to it, really, at all. And here, all these extra scrolls, for some reason. And then if you look at the sides here, this Reed and Beale design down here really is just piled on for no particular reason. He's piled on sort of a bit of chinoiserie here, for example, too, quite unnecessary. This one just seems so much more confident as well. When you put the two side by side and you look at the curvature of the backs too, look at the way that this has the most marvellously elegant curvature to it, just one splendid swoop. Whereas on this one, we're going down to here, then suddenly it goes rather straight, and then the curve continues. Something obviously went wrong. So all in all, the two might have a lot of similarities, but put the two side by side, and you really begin to see something quite different emerging.
To meet demand for his exquisite furniture, Thomas set up shop in the fashionable St Martin's Lane.
St Martin's Lane was a great area of furniture makers. You had all the big names there, Weil, Cobb, Chippendale, Linnell. So the environment is utterly creative. You're surrounded by, it's not just furniture makers. You've got goldsmiths, there are artists, the sculptors, people what we would now call the creative industries, but the 18th century equivalent of them, all milling around St Martin's Lane. Must have been quite a hot spot.
He lived and worked in numbers 60, 61 and 62.
The The workshop itself consisted on the front of St Martin's Lane, his own dwelling house.